Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell. Yeah. Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got a few things here that we got to be talking about. Hopefully, you're able to see or check out what's going on and what's going down, what's happening, everybody. That's right. We are here, and it's a little bit of a delay when it comes to the this particular edition of the Boxing Source Podcast for August 17th, 2025. Right. We've had at least over in my area or my neck of the woods, I had a little bit of a I would say storming or whatever it is. And then, I had a few things that had to take care of as well. So I had to delay this particular live edition, all right, for at least about an hour. So it would be about 7:37 Central Time or whatever it is. So, but you still, we're still going to be talking about, what happened over for Riyadh season. We're going to see if we can touch on a couple things from the Pro Box event that happened on last Friday as well. And also, wanted to talk about a couple other topics that have been floating around here, in boxing circles, right? So, got a few things here that we're going to cover, first off, wanted to, touch on what happened at Riyadh season, particularly the main event there at Riyadh season. Yeah, Moses Itauma, 7 in the ring there, going up against Dillian Whyte. Okay, so that was there in the heavyweight division. And, Dillian Whyte has been, kind of like one of those fringe contenders here for some time now. Had a couple of instances where, he would have, challenged for a world title or whatever it is, right? But, ended up coming short there, particularly in this latest edition there, going up against Tyson Fury. So, with that being said, I wanted to see if he would be able to give Moses Itauma some trouble here in that bout. And man, I don't know what to kind of say about this thing here. You know what I mean? I don't know what to really say about this thing here because you had this be a first round knockout victory for Moses Itauma, right? And my question for Dillian Whyte was, did you even pinch him? Did you even pinch him? Like, come on, man. What are we doing here? Like, you had this opportunity to, derail the momentum here of Moses Itauma, who came in there with a record of 12-0. Yeah, 12-0. So he ain't really had that many fights here in the pro game. But yet, you were there as like one of those contenders and whatnot, trying to see if you could get back into world title contention. You had, like I said, you had that world title bout against Tyson Fury back in 2022. And yeah, you lost by knockout. And, it kind of like was a bout where he really didn't have much of a shot or didn't really give that much of an effort to really affect Tyson Fury in that fight. But having a couple of bouts after that, we had this bout against Christian Hammer and Ebenezer Tete, and I'm like, well, you had that, and also Jermaine Franklin, right? But you had a serious gap between the fights with Jermaine Franklin and Christian Hammer. So it's like Christian Hammer, really? Ebenezer Tete, really? Is that going to prepare you for fighting guys in the, top 10 or top 15 within the what I would say the rankings or whatnot, right? So going up here against Moses Itauma, who has gotten a lot of this hype or whatever it is, and like I said, coming from the UK, there, he's around 6'4" or whatnot, so he's not like one of those, as they say, those super heavyweights. But as we see here with the undisputed champion being Alexander Usyk there, who's around 6'2", 6'3", then maybe you have these guys that have a good amount of skill or whatever it is that can really challenge and take down most of the big folks out there. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, I don't know what's happening here. Shout out to those early in the live chat. Shout out to Jesus Sim. It says the UK is trying to shove us in to buy stock in most of the time because Whyte took a dive. Come on, heavyweights are old and on their way out. Hey, Jesus Sim. Shout out to you. Shout out to you, Jesus Sim. You pretty much like nailed it right on the button there when it comes to Dillian Whyte. As I said before, Dillian Whyte didn't even really pinch the dude. Like, come on, what are we doing here? You know what I'm saying? What are we doing here? Like, I didn't see him throw that one punch basically within those 2 minutes or whatever, from that first round. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, he gets knocked down, and yeah, you've seen most of the time I kind of like do that swipe down move that a number of fighters are doing, and that once you have folks on the high guard or whatever, and you just swipe down one of the hands to have one side of their face open, and then try to shoot with a power shot, whether it's from the left hand or the right hand. And yeah, you did see that from Moses Itauma, but I yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. That punch right there, I don't know, man. That I don't know if you call it a phantom punch or whatever, because bro, I didn't see that really like affecting the Dillian Whyte like that. Jesus Sim saying here early, Jared Anderson versus Moses Atama. If Jared Anderson wins, I don't know what he's gonna win because I don't know what fight he's gonna be involved in here. At least as of right now, I really don't know at this point. But for most of the time, he gets a first round knockout victory there within like 2 minutes of the first round against Dillian Whyte in that main event. Okay, and the folks are like saying, okay, he's there at 20 years old and he's already like a highly rated fighter in the rankings, right? He was there, I would say as the number one in the WBO. Like they got him at number one in the WBO, and of course you got the situation there with Xander Usyk, as I said, the undisputed champion right now. But Joseph Parker is a WBO interim champion, right? And after the fight, they're like, hey, we want to get Moses Atama in there in the ring against Alexander Usyk. He is ready to fight Alexander Usyk or whatever they're trying to do or to say in reference to that. But I'm like, yo, what are we doing here? Like, why are we having somebody like Moses Atama, who, as I said, is at 20 years old, has 13 professional fights to his record, 11 wins by way of knockout, but 13 fights overall, right? Why are they trying to have him step in the ring against Alexander Usyk right off the rip? Okay, isn't the Itauma like one of those guys that what I would say is like a Queensbury promotions type fighter or whatever it is? Or they, if he's someone like that, would you really think that Frank Warren and all of them would try to have Moses Atama right in the ring against Alexander Usyk? He's already had. Listen, man. Alexander Usyk is single-handedly taking down all of these fighters from Queensbury Promotions. Okay, you got first you got Tyson Fury when he initially won the undisputed championship. He got him again in the rematch. Last December, right? Then we go all the way to July this year, and he pretty much embarrasses Daniel Dubois. Now you mean to tell me that you're gonna put up another one of them fighters in Moses Atama to go up against Alexander Usyk? Nah, you might as well, just give up that phone call over to Joseph Parker and say, hey, maybe you could get him. He's there as a WBO champion. I talked with the WBO. They said, hey, Parker's next in line. That's the one that should happen. So I know what Turkey is talking about, but I don't know. Jesus Sam, shout out. He says he heard I get Cabello versus Moses Atama. I mean, you got Moses Atama there. Of course, like I said, number one in the WBO. And right, you got Agit Cabello as the WBC interim heavyweight champion, right? It says, well, they trying to pass the torch to Moses Itauma, try to fast track him. Man, hey, listen, I don't know why they trying to do that off the rip. I mean, look at what happened. I mean, I'd rather have them, try to do something when it comes to how they matched up Daniel Dubois early. And, he had his fight against Joe Joyce, and, that ended up happening. He had the fight with Joe Joyce, ended up getting stopped. But then he had those fights to kind of like build him up and build him up and build him up. To have the initial fight there with Alexander Usyk, had the stoppage loss to Usyk, where, of course, a number of people felt like he won that fight by knockout. But, hey, Luis Pabon, boy, he's kind of like the, what I would say, he's kind of like, one of those, rogue referees, according to some people. You know what I'm saying? So if Luis Pabon would have made that call, then hey, you would have had Daniel Dubois as the champion at that time for that initial fight between Daniel Dubois and Alexander Usyk. But hey, it is what it is. You know what I mean? And shout out to Troy Graham in the building, man. Blessings to you, bro. On the live chat, he says this is a cash out before someone defeats his one-dimensional style. Man, So yeah, and shout out to Jesus M. Like, you got those guys, the Furies, the Anthony Joshua's, the Alexander Usyk, the Zalay Zangs, the Deontay Wilders. They are pretty much like on the back end, or well in the back end of their careers. They're pretty much like on their way out. So you got to get another set of heavyweights out there to kind of like contend. And so you got your Itauma there, as I mentioned, only 20 years old, right? You got him at like 20 years old. You got, even though he's already been a champion before as a former WBO heavyweight champion there in Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker is there at 33 years old. Dubois, world champion, IBF champion, 27 years old currently. Kabiel is at 32. Wardley, who's mentioned there, is at 30. Okoli is there at 32. Like, Joshua is there at 35, but I mean, you've seen the fights that he's had over the course of his career, at least from like 2016, 2017 up to this point. So, here, like, this is kind of like, even though he probably should have been more towards the prime of his career at this point, the way that he was being matched up, having these big fights after big fights after big fights, now it's like, okay, we don't know where Joshua is in this particular point of his career. They can say that he's in the back end. That's why some people are mentioning him fighting guys like Jake Paul or Andre Ward. Like, we just had this whole thing about Anthony Joshua and Andre Ward. Andre Ward's been out in the game for 10 years, over 10 years. Is an International Boxing Hall of Fame inductee. He was part of that class that happened there in 2022. We had 3 classes there, 2020, 2021, and 2022. Andre Ward was part of that class. Now you mean to tell me that he could potentially try to come back after all these years against Anthony Joshua? Listen, we gotta slow down. We gotta stop with all of these, guys that have been out in the game for so long. Listen, we had this whole thing with Manny Pacquiao. Okay, that was like 4 years out the game. And I know what happened there with what is it? In women's boxing, Holly Holm came back after like 12 years out the boxing ring or whatever it is, and got a win, right? But listen, we can't have like these Andre Wards or Layla Ali's or whatever getting back in the game after being out for so many years. Like this is the hurt business. It's a business, but it's a hurt business still. So I would be like, yo, I don't know. I don't care if they talking about no 15 million or 20 million or all this type of payday type stuff. Like, you don't really need to be doing all that. You feel me? It says what Jesus says here in the live chat. I still want to see more of Moses Itauma in real bouts, no dives. Hey man, hey, listen. Listen, man. This right here. Oh man, this one reminded me of Deontay Wilder versus Malik Scott. Hey man, hey, I'm telling you, it reminded me something like Deontay Wilder versus Malik Scott, man. That's what it reminded me of, okay? So it almost looked like something there where it was a solid. You feel me? Oh man, but Moses Itauma, Like I said, 20 years old. 20 years old, and he's already ranked at number one in the WBO, right? And so we gonna try to get one of our panelists here, to jump in. He's just about set up here and everything like that. It's been a good little minute, but we need to hear from our guy here, and that's the boxing academic. What's going on?
Hey, what's going on, JR? How you doing today?
All good, man. All good, fam. Just talking these fights and reacting to this first round knockout from Moses Itauma, man. And I'm like, man, I think Dylan White did a solid because I don't even think like he threw but one punch in that 2 minutes of the fight. Not even like one punch.
Yeah, he was still getting the train going, and before he seemed to get it up to even walking speed, he got sparked out, as the UK folks say.
Yeah. Got knocked spark out. Yeah, yeah. It was crazy. I was like, man, he almost he like had high guard and all this type of stuff, and I ain't see him like really throw any type of punch. And then when he got knocked down, it was like I didn't think it was like a real solid shot like that. But he kind of like reacted like his equilibrium was off, and then the referee just called it right from there, and that was it. It was a wrap, man. So I'm like, I see people that don't want to see much from Dylan White ever again after this. And for Moses Otama, like I don't see him like really being ready for these guys at the top of the division like that. Like they got to slow down, at least for me. What did you think about that post fight reaction for them trying to match Otama with like a Alexander Usyk?
Well, let me speak on the fight for a second, and I'll talk on that. So that outcome was always going to happen. So whether it happened in the second round, the sixth round, eighth round, he was going to hit Dylan White with all them shots eventually, and he was going to knock Dylan White out like that eventually. Because just even the way that Dylan's guard was kind of set up, them shots was going to land whenever he decided to throw them. At the same time, the two shots that landed the cleanest were on the back of the head. And like this is a part of boxing. I'm not trying to say this or that because Atama was going to win the fight, but
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, the first shot that sort of messed up his equilibrium was on the back of the head. And the referee didn't say nothing, so I mean that's a legal shot at that point. And then after he was on the rope and was like sitting down trying to get away from the shots and stuff, the next consequential shot was again, from my opinion, on the back of the head as well. And then that's what kind of made him sit down or get down, whatever, get down or lay down. 50 Cent, word to 50 Cent. Um, yeah, but I mean that outcome was gonna happen. I'm not saying like there's a controversy because I mean Dylan White would have had to came out there and just swung with him, and that would have been his best chance to for anything, because Otama's just shots just were too fast, too quick. Speed kills, and them
Mm-hmm.
young cats they mad quick, man. Word to currency on that one. And yeah, so with them saying pairing him with Usyk and all that stuff, quite naturally, with him being young and spry and can throw shots fast and got that young man pop and speed which converts to
Yeah.
power and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he need to wait his turn. He need to wait his turn. There's a lot of other people in front of him. I mean, he did a good job. Even like them saying Joseph Parker and Joseph. I saw a headline where Joseph Parker said, "Yeah, the Atoma fight could happen." Like even with Joseph Parker, like he need to wait his turn. He don't deserve Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker has worked way too hard. Caballero has worked way too hard. He needs to wait his turn. He need to fight, name a fighter, but he need to fight
Richard
that fighter.
Torres.
And like I don't care how good he is. He gotta wait. He gotta prove to us that he is that good. He could be the goods, but the same way every other fighter in every other division gotta like fight somebody of consequence. I mean, Dylan White is cool, right? But he's an older fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily call him. Well, maybe he is shot born now, but yeah. I mean, Dylan past his prime. It probably is time for Dylan to think about his health, do something else.
Yeah, I mean the thing about it with Dylan White, right? Like he's had four losses overall. But all four losses have been by stoppage. Like, Joshua knocked him out, Povetkin knocked him the hell out. You know what I mean? Tyson Fury like gave him an uppercut and pushed him to the canvas. And then you see what happened here with Moses Itauma. So it's like there's not really any other path, for someone like Dillian Whyte to get back into a title contention like that. You know what I'm
He
saying?
could fight Deontay Wilder.
Well, he could, but will he though? That's
I
the
don't
question.
know. I mean, they both, you know,
I mean, if they say, "Hey, listen, we'll finally see if we could get one of these fights that should have happened like a few years ago," then yeah, maybe. But outside of that, I don't know if that would kind of like make much of a difference either. You know what I mean? So I see like for a path for Moses Atomo or something like that. Like he needs to fight like a guy like a Richard Torres. I was mentioning Richard Torres there, a young guy that's coming up in the ranks, or maybe a F.A. Jogba or something like that. Who had the decision win there, against Martin Bacoli in the last joint. You know what I mean? So those could be two guys that Moses Atama could fight. While you got somebody like a Joseph Parker or I get Cabio that have had these key wins over fighters that have been, higher ranked in the division at heavyweight than Moses Atama. So you can't necessarily skip the line like that. You know what I mean? So that's the thing there. I mean, I'd rather have Moses Atama face another one of those guys like a Jogba Torres or David Adelaide or someone like that because Adelaide had a good fight, a really good fight, there against Philip Hergovich. That was like that was probably the fight of the night. You know what I'm saying? So I would say if you're gonna have Moses Atama kind of like slowly build his way up there in the heavyweight division, kind of do that. You know what I'm saying? What you don't want is an instance like what happened with Jared Anderson. Jared Anderson, was slowly coming up the ranks there in the heavyweight division. Fought guys like former IBF heavyweight champion Charles Martin. A few other guys that have been like, floating around there in the heavyweight division. And then he wanted to, step right in to a fight with Martin Bacoli. And it was advised by, his former trainer and with the promoter there, Bob Arum, like, you don't want to do that. But the money like got to him, there real quick. And then he just said, you know what? I'm gonna go forward with the fight and had the thing there. Sugar Hill Stewart was his trainer for the time of the fight. And Martin McCauley just ended up beating him up and stopping him. And now you see where, Jared Anderson is right now. You don't want to have that same situation here coming up with Moses Atama if you're going to put him in there against like a Alexander Usyk, against a Joseph Parker, against like a like a Aggie Cabello. Those fights for Moses Atama right now ain't necessarily it. You should have them have those kind of like fights against guys that have around the same record at this point. You know what I mean? Because if you were able to do that with Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce, a few years ago, you could do that here with Moses Atama. You know what I'm
let me
saying?
tell you who I don't know if at this point if he would beat just because we need more information. Wardley.
Yeah, yeah.
To me, they sort of like the same fighter.
That's another one. Fabio Wardley, who's been around there around that same kind of record and that type of stuff, man. So I'd rather see something like that too. Him against Fabio Wardley would kind of work at this point. Like who else is there? Like, cause you got Wardley there at what 19-0-1. Around that same. Like I said, has a few more fights there than Moses Asama, but we don't necessarily know how good Fabio Wardley is right now. But you got him that's had his win over Justice Unity a couple months ago, and he's there at like 30 years old too. So it's like have those guys that I mentioned before, like Joseph Parker or Aggie Cabello or like a Fabio Wardley, see if they have those opportunities to fight for a world title here later on down the line, because we don't necessarily know what could be really next for Alexander Usyk. If he fights like a Joseph Parker, if it's going to happen this year, it's one thing. If he doesn't, and then it goes to next year, or they try to have him fight Fury again, that could mean that Alexander Usyk only has like a couple more fights left in his professional career. So if you're gonna have that kind of like that plan for Usyk, you should have Moses Itauma kind of like build himself up. So once that time comes and like either Usyk's gonna be there in 2026 or somebody else will be there, for Moses Itauma to fight for a world title, that he'll have a couple more fights under his belt and be more, I would say, more seasons and more ready to have that fight takes place instead of having them go up against a guy like Alexander Usyk right now, especially coming off of what Usyk did to Daniel Dubois over at Wembley Stadium. That's something that I wouldn't necessarily advise there at that point or at this point here currently when it comes to Moses Tama.
I mean, how do they even like? I get the crowd like him and stuff, but like, who do you think you are to like suggest that he gets a fight with Usyk? And I'm not trying to put Usyk on this big pedal, even though his pedal is higher than everybody else's in the heavyweight division. But you looking up at him, like, what kind of sense is that for him to like fight you? Like it doesn't make sense to me. Like I get it, it's wishful. I mean, it's what every young fighter does. They say, "I want the best fighter. I want the top guy." Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you want me, but fight Wortley, and then let's see how you do. Which he probably would beat Wortley when I think about it, because Wortley was losing that fight, and then he got a like as AJ say, a shot from the gods and landed a shot from the gods, but he was kind of losing the fight, and I think he had gotten hurt a few times in the fight.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a crazy fight there against Sassoon in his last bout there in June. Because he was losing the fight. He was by a good margin. You know what I'm saying? And he still was able to get a knockout win there in the 10th round, man. So that probably was like one of the better fights of the year as far as like the heavyweight division goes. So yeah, so that's what you had there in that instance. So yeah, Fabio Wardley versus Moses Atama. That's the type of fight that I would want to see for both fighters at this particular point of their careers. You got Fabio Wardley, who had like a win over David Adelaide, who was on this card here on yesterday, and he has that knockout win over Fraser Clark, has a win over Justice Huey. Like, and those guys were pretty much like undefeated up to the point that when Fabio Wardley fought him. So if you're gonna have more of these type of matchups happen, there goes another one. Wardley versus Atama. I think that is gonna be the one that would kind of like make the most sense here at this particular point for both of those careers. Shout out on the live chat there. Bruce Gas, Boxer Jazz, and more in the building. Troy Graham in the building. My guy Ron G is in the building as well, man. So shout out to all of y'all. Like I was saying,
I,
I mean,
can I
yeah,
speak to
go
Troy?
ahead.
Come in. I don't remember specifically the one he said. I'm sure Wilder was ducking. Can you pull that one up?
Oh yeah, when White was Wilder's mandatory, why didn't Wilder fight him? Wilder is known for ducking fights, not Dillian White.
I'm sure whatever it was, Wilder had something better to do. That's what I'm sure. I'm sure he had something better to do than to fight Dylan White. I don't remember, but I'm almost sure he had something better to do.
I remember that particular time period, and there was something that particularly happened. But I'm hoping that we might get more insight into that particular topic. While we continue to go through with this show. Okay, all right. So that was the thing there with the main event. We had like a few other fights that were on there. I don't know why you had like Ray Ford on the YouTube portion, but you had Ray Ford there getting a win over Abraham Nova. You had Nick Ball getting a decision win over Sam Goodman. You had Philip Hergovich, as I mentioned there, getting a decision win over David Avila in a fight. Like, hey, sometimes these heavyweight fights, they could really be something there, and that's what you had here. I mean, you had Adelaide, get knocked down in one of the rounds, and then he, responded right back and landed a good number of shots. But I'm still surprised that he wasn't able to knock down Philip Hergovich in that joint, because if he was able to, that probably could have turned the whole fight around in that point. You know what I mean? And then you also had like Hayato Susumi, man, they be, I don't know, man, what's up with these Riyadh season folks, whatever it is. They love them some these Susumi guys, man, or Reito and then Hayato and some of these other brothers. I don't know. There might be like three or four of them. I don't know. He was on there having a fight, and then Muhammad Alakel gets a first round stoppage win over Santosh Singh. I don't know. They got this name on the box rec that starts with a Y, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be saying all that. Said Wilder has something better to do, fight lesser opponents and lose to Fury 3 times. That's what Troy Graham is saying out there. Uh,
Lose to Fury or fight Dylan White. Put it on the scale.
so it's like either fight, a Tyson Fury or fight a Dylan White. It's one of those.
Tough decision. Tough decision.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not tough at all.
Yeah. So yeah, man. So you're back on the thing here with this event that was like I said, Riyadh season, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia there. You had, like I said, Turkey LLC. If they put this stuff there in Riyadh season, then they're paying these fighters or whatever it is that, these promoters don't necessarily have to worry about, the purses, so to speak, whatever it is. So, and it would be probably, I think it's a case where all that the promoters do is basically get the percentage off of the fighters that are involved in the card, and they don't have to worry about overhead costs. They don't have to worry about booking a venue. They don't have to worry about too much about promotion or anything like that. All they just do is provide the fighters, since they're under a promotional contract, through these respective companies here, whether it's Matchroom Boxing or Queensberry Promotions or something like that. So if Turkey Al Ashiki is saying, hey, we'll put up the money Riyadh season. The guys there under Saudi Arabia, doing their thing, if they're willing to put up the money in order to, as they say, try to push or increase tourism there in Saudi Arabia, then hey, the promoters will be like, hey, go ahead, go right ahead, go right ahead, go right ahead. There. So yeah. I wanted to
Can you
revisit.
pull up his comment again so I can respond? This is
Hold
my
on.
last time responding.
Okay, hold on. So he said, well, Wilder, like I said, Wilder has something better to do. Let's opponent. So he says now losing advances your career.
No. So losing to Tyson Fury and making how much he made in most of them fights?
At least what, $20 million at the very minimum, $20 to $30 million.
So losing to Tyson Fury and making at a minimum $20 million does advance your career. It lets you get closer to retirement, which Deontay Wilder, as he went through those fights, got closer to retirement. So I mean, there's no way you can like realistically justify to say fighting Dylan White is better than fighting Tyson Fury in any stretch of the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
That's my
Yeah,
last comment, no matter what he say.
yeah. So that's the thing. So it's more about the fighter, or the opponent that you get. You know what I'm saying? So like for example, there with Deontay Wilder, real quick with this one, with Deontay Wilder as a WBC heavyweight champion, it's better for him to have a fight against a Tyson Fury there who was more known than a Dylan White. You know, even with Dylan White as the number one contender. Okay, it was the number one contender. I'm gonna just say that, right? That isn't really gonna do much to really affect the career of Deontay Wilder at that point. Similar case with Dylan White when he was the number one contender in the WBO rankings at heavyweight. A certain thing happened where he was supposed to be the mandatory challenger to the WBO champion at the time, but then there was a certain person that was the undisputed cruiserweight champion that moved up to heavyweight and then eventually became the mandatory challenger with the WBO over Dylan White. So there's
And fighting Usyk mattered more to the sport than fighting Dylan White again.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thing is, Troy, I sent something out to you, so you should. I don't know what's going on because I sent something out to you. Know that it went towards your towards your message thing, so you should be able to have the link in order for you to speak your piece on that point. But wanted to touch on this thing here, back with the Riyadh season card. Two things with it. One, You had Raymond Ford there that was able to get a decision win over Abraham Nova there in the super featherweight division. Of course, Raymond Ford had been a world champion of sorts there when he had to win over Odebek Komatov, right? And then the next fight over, he ended up losing to Nick Ball by split decision in another one of those Riyadh season events last year. So now here we are, like fast forward, it's a year later, he's there in the super featherweight division going up against Abraham Nova, and kind of like trying to see if he could contend for a world title there at 130 pounds. He got a decision win, and he, man, I don't know, man. Like, I'm gonna be real with y'all. All right, now I've been to one at least one fight that um involved Ray Ford, and that was the one that happened with him and Orlando Gonzalez, right? And remember, like at that point, he had lost to Nick Ball. They were saying like you were struggling to get down to featherweight, so that's why he had the whole thing there with Nick Ball. And then the next fight over, he ended up moving up to the 130-pound division, right? And the thing about it is that with that fight, I thought he was going to, really like beat up his opponent there, and nah, like he went closer to like a 10 round decision over Orlando Gonzalez at the Wells Fargo Center. And then now, we have a fight against Thomas Matisse that was on another DAZN card, another matchroom card. That was, another part of a Boots fight. So he was on the card with, Boots and Karen Chikazi in that rematch in 2024. And then when Boots was fighting Iman Stanionis here on April 12th, you had Ray Ford against Thomas Matisse. And I was like, yo, you got to be able to show something that says, okay, you're really ready to like challenge for a world title there at 130 pounds. And is sometimes some people say skills pay bills, but there's got to be something else that you have, another wrinkle to your game that says, oh, okay, he has the opportunity to like stop somebody. You know what I mean? And there I was like, and let's see, and shout out my guy Cat Quest in the building, from around the area and whatnot. He said, yeah, Big Jersey didn't look great there. He said Ford needs to step it up another level, but a solid victory nonetheless. And my guy, there's topic in the building says a big stock rising fight for Ray Ford. All right. But I mean, he's there, of course, like contending in the super featherweight division. He's there like number 3 in the WBC, number 4 in the IBF. It got him around like number 5 in the WBO, number 4 in the WBA. So if you got like, say for example, if you had like a Raymond Ford fighting a Mark Magsayo, with like a final eliminator or something like that, would you kind of like pick Ray Ford to win that fight against Mark Magsayo, or do you think that's like a toss up fight, y'all? I'm not sure. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like for me, like I see some of these guys here at the 130-pound division that's like, yeah, they could win, but also they could, like they could crack, they could have power or something like that. Like for example, look what Charlie Suarez did in his fight against Emmanuel Navarrete. He was there, he was cracking, man, and that should have been a punch. And y'all know it. That should have been a decision or a technical knockout win for Charlie Suarez against Emmanuel Navarrete, and they called that thing a headbutt. You know what I'm saying? But you got someone like that. You got like a Mark Magsayo that has a little bit of pop in his punch. We get to see what's going on with Eduardo Nunez. He got a fight coming up. We got Oshaki Foster that's had like a late TKO victory, in his career. So how is Raymond Ford, going to be matching up against none of these guys, whether they're world champions or they're, top contenders at 130 pounds? You know what I'm saying? So let me see here, man. I'll have to check something here because I was trying to see if I can get another panelist in. So I'm gonna see if I can work on that also there. But we'll see how it goes here when it comes to Ray Ford, because I want to see like what could be potentially next for him, later on down the line. And you had in another fight there in Riyadh season, Nick Ball, right? and Nick Ball was able to go up against Sam Goodman. And this Sam Goodman is kind of like known to some for having these multiple opportunities to fight Naoya Inoue there at 122 pounds, and didn't necessarily go for those fights against Naoya Inoue. And now he was able to get himself in position to fight Nick Ball, who is there as a world champion at 126, right? Um, but me personally, I don't buy much into Sam Goodman. All right. And to be honest with y'all, I'm gonna say this too. I don't buy much into Nick Ball. It's crazy. You got Nick Ball there. That's a world champion at 130 pounds, and he's listed at 5'2". That's right, 5'2". That's like that's shorter than Spud Webb. You know what I'm saying? That was a slam dunk champion back in the late '80s or something. Late '80s, early '90s or something. And Nick Ball is even like shorter than that dude. And you got him that's had his wins over what is it like a Ronnie Rios, TJ Doheny, Sam Goodman. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, a split decision win over Ray Ford. But like even with him being at 23 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw, like could people like say that he's like one of the guys you would consider as a top guy in his weight class? Yeah, I don't know. CapQuest here says I think Espinoza could go up to 130 and clean house. Hey, I've been waiting for a fight between Rafael Espinoza and Emmanuel Navarrete. I've been waiting for that fight. That is the fight that they should make there at that 126 to 130 pound division there. Emmanuel Navarrete, multi-division world champion, and Espinoza, I feel like, is the top guy there at 126 pounds right now. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing about it. So yeah, let me see here. Because I'm trying to, get more panelists here to join in. So I'm gonna see here if I could do that. So y'all just give me a few moments on that. But I'm gonna talk about this other thing here real quick too, right? So you got in that 154-pound division, right? That you got WBO, newly crowned WBO champion there, 154 pounds there in Xander Zayas, and you got the WBC interim champion there, right, in Vergil Ortiz Jr. And it seems like they've been going back and forth about, Vergil Ortiz Jr. and his team offered Xander Zayas to fight in like a 50-50 split or whatever it is. And, Xander Zayas was like, we had this thing here. I was like a real, as they say, a real world champion. They're getting a WBO title in his win over Jorge Garcia Perez at the Theater of Madison Square Garden, right? So immediately after that fight, they were talking about, we want to have, Xander Zayas see if we can have a defense of that title over in his home country of Puerto Rico. So that was kind of like initially their plan. But as we all know, Top Rank, that particular event, that was the last one that they had under the ESPN network contract. So they don't necessarily have a home, at least as of right now. You know what I'm saying? So I would have been like up in the air as far as like how they would be able to, have a fight for Xander Zayas defending that WBO title over in Puerto Rico if it was going to have like, a broadcaster or something like that. You know what I mean? So, with that being said, now you got this whole thing with Vergil Ortiz Jr., right? And over the past like few months or so, they said something about Vergil Ortiz Jr. trying to, nurse himself from injuries. We had his fights, what I'm saying, against Israel Madrimov, right? And Sorry Boachuk. And, with his fight against Madrimov, he was able to, get like what the WBC interim belt, but had an injury in the process. So they were going to try to slowly get him back in the game. So now they're saying, we could have potentially had a bout between Vergil Ortiz Jr. and Xander Zayas. And I'm like, I'm not sure about all that. So I got to see if I could pull up something when it comes to those two, because it really had something, there happening or going on between the two. And Xander Zayas kind of like clapped back at, what was going on there between his team and the team over at Golden Boy, who represents Vergil Ortiz Jr. Now with Vergil Ortiz Jr., I thought they would try to have him be featured in a hometown fight over in the Dallas area. And if they were going to do that, then we gotta you gotta figure out what's going on with all that first before you can have maybe Xander Zayas in there against Vergil Ortiz Jr. Shout out Cap Quest there in the building. Says Xander got the move up, man. He's weight draining. Hey, maybe he got to do that, man. I don't know. My guy Joe was in the building, man. What's going on with you? Hey, y'all be sure to check out, of course, Real Boxing with Coach Ronnie Shields Tuesday nights here on this channel here. So we're scheduled to have a special show on Tuesday nights. So y'all tune in for that. But I wanted to get back into this comment from Cat Quest here on the live chat. He says that Xander Zayas has to move up there to like 160 pounds. He's weight draining. Hey man, I'm not all too sure about all that. You know what I mean? Because if he was able to, get himself to the point where he could fight for and win the WBO Super Welterweight title, then you know what I mean. I'd have to say that maybe he can, have a couple more fights there within this particular weight class. I thought that they would try to have Xander Zayas going up against Vito Milnicki Jr. They're at 154 pounds, but Vito Milnicki Jr. couldn't necessarily, make the weight there. So you see that Milnicki is already campaigning there at 160 pounds. But hey, as you see here for Xander Zayas, he was able to get the WBO title out of the whole thing.
I got a random comment
All right,
from like 2 weeks ago.
all right. 2 weeks ago, what you got?
I want to tell Joseph he didn't remember why I'm called a boxing academic. So I'm going to show him. I'm going to carve out some time since I have to prove things to him to show him why people call me the boxing academic.
Man, you
And
don't have to worry.
no, I'm gonna do it. He don't remember, so I'm gonna carve out time. And the only thing I need from you, Jr., is to
Uh-huh.
give me 10 minutes of unadulterated talking. I ain't gonna say nothing crazy, but just give me 10 minutes on your show where I can prove how ridiculous it is to say that Josh Taylor and Regis Prograis should be higher rated on a top, one ever one 30 was it? 140. I'm sorry, 140 pound. In the last 30 years list. So
The
yeah,
ranking.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
So I'm gonna show him why I'm the boxing academic and show how ridiculous that is to say that. Even though he sort of backtracked on it, but I'm still gonna do it just because yeah, I got time. I'm gonna make time. How about that?
All right. We'll see if we could kind of have times of reference to that. But my guy Joe says, I mean, it is what it is. It's whatever there. So
Nah. He cared to say it about 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to do something. Of course he don't care once he knew that it was a ridiculous take. But yeah. I'm just gonna point out, I'm gonna show you why I'm the boxing academic and show you why how ridiculous that was. Cause you made a comment to say, he said something along the lines of like what what gives you the right to sort of to say this. And so yeah. I'll show you. I'll show you. I'll show
got
you.
you, got you. Now, all right. So he says you got CapQuest says Vito Milnicki. He's not sold on Vito Milnicki Jr., particularly there in the 160-pound division there. So you got that in. Oh, we might have a debate of sorts
No, we
here.
ain't having no debate today. I'm gonna show him why I'm the boxing academic. The same way he get time to talk and without people interrupting him because he like to interrupt people. You gonna give me time to talk without him interrupting me, and I'm gonna show him why his take is ridiculous
Okay.
without being interrupted.
All right. So what we're gonna do here, at least here in the gap. So let's see if Box Academic is ready to, kind of like respond in reference to that top 10 list there for the 140-pound division You could go right ahead when you
No,
can.
no, no. I'm gonna do it later. I'm gonna do it later.
Okay,
I'm gonna do
okay,
it later.
all right. So we got that there on the docket. We got that on the docket. All right. So also, wanted to touch on something else here real quick. In reference to ProBox TV, you had fights there on ProBox TV. That was on Friday. In the headlining bout, you had Muhammad Yakubov there against William Foster III. There, two contenders there within that 130-pound division, and you had Muhammad Yakubov getting a majority decision win there over William Foster III. There with two scores of 98-92 and one score of 95-95. They had like a USA super featherweight title there that was on the line and kind of like was an eliminator there of sorts within the, I would say, the WBC. You had Muhammad Yakubov there that was ranked at number 5 going into that bout there. So you had that. And so I say, that kind of is I, I would say Yakubov, kind of like outpointed William Foster over the majority of those rounds. You're seeing like a lot of the movement, the herky jerky movement there. I know that we talked with William Foster the third there, a week before, and he said like this was something there where he had to deal with the fighter there that was a southpaw. And he's was shorter southpaw, but he was like really moving. He was really kind of like bobbing and weaving and giving William Foster a good number of fits there, particularly in the first half of this particular fight. You know what I mean? So, with that being said, you have Yakubov there that was able to get this win. He's there at now 23 wins and one loss. And what is he? He's like a Samson Promotions or a Samson Boxing fighter there. So you might be able to have Samson Lukowitz get him in position for a key bout, maybe later on down the line. I don't know if they'll have him, facing like a Mark McSile there who's under Manny Pacquiao Promotions. That could be potentially a bout that I would say is a like a final eliminator of sorts. If you're gonna have a Shockey Foster, who is a WBC champion, they're going up against Stephen Fulton later this year, then maybe they could have a final eliminator between Yakubov there and Mark McSile. That could probably make sense there at this particular point. You know what I mean? So there's the thing on that. You know what I mean? So I I was talking about that, and what else was there that was on the pro box? You had Gary Antonio Russell there that was on this card here against Dervin Rodriguez, got him a unanimous decision victory. You had Starlin Castillo there with the decision win over Shanar Bunch. Marcus Valle had like an easy win over Luis Georges there. So that kind of like rounded out what was going on there in the Pro Box card that was last Friday here or over there in Plant City, Florida, and stuff like that. So you did have that. What is it? They had
Russell looked pretty good.
yeah, he did. He did. He was there. His timing was all good and all that type of stuff there. I was out, by the gym like the last week, there with him, kind of like sharpening it up and stuff like that. So, but they got him, kind of like rated high within that weight class too. So they're trying to see if they could get him, in position to, contend for a world title. Either that or they have maybe a final eliminator of sorts there against Ramon Cardenas. So that's kind of like been the buzz, is that Gary Russell could be fighting Ramon Cardenas later this year. And we saw what Ramon Cardenas had in this performance against Naoya Inoue there and what was that, May 4th, something like that, there over at Las Vegas. So this could be a really, really key bout there at 122 pounds, having Gary Antonio Russell going up against Ramon Cardenas if they're able to lock down the fight. Cap Quest here says, Shockey Foster there versus Raymond Ford would be a decent squabble. I mean, we could see they're going to be able to, have that take place there, later on down the line, depending on what happens there with William Foster on that front. You know what I mean? So got that on docket. Kind of like here, like a number of things that may be going on at 154 pounds is saying that potentially Keith Thurman could be facing Sebastian Fundora for Fundora's WBC title. We talked about the whole thing there with the WBO champion Xander Zayas. We don't know what's going on with the IBF champion there, Bakhramur Zaliev. Initially, we thought that he would be facing Erickson Lubin, but now it looks like Erickson Lubin could be in another bout, potentially against Vergil Ortiz Jr. And the whole WBA situation, we all know, of course, Terrence Crawford has that WBA title, but you got Yoenis Tejas as the interim champion, and he's supposed to be fighting next weekend over in Orlando, Florida. And you got Jerome Boots Ennis going up against Uisma Lima in October. That's going to be a WBA, as they say, a final eliminator of sorts, right? So that's the thing that we have there within 154 pounds, but kind of like makes for a mixed bag. We've had instances where 154 has had a number of good matchups, kind of like culminating in, at the time, Jermell Charlo becoming the undisputed champion there when his win over Brian Carlos Casano. And that was like, what, back in 2022? Yeah. That's been a good while since that happened. But now you got the belts like all in the mix again. And now we got to see who could, really sort itself out and say that, okay, we could be seeing who would be the top fighter there of 154 pounds. And yes, I did see that whole little graphic by Premier Boxing Champions, with those guys that they have at 154. And a couple of people that were included on there was Jermell Charlo, former undisputed champion, and also Errol Spence Jr. Now, you're putting it out there. They're kind of like throwing little hints here and there that maybe Errol Spence Jr. is coming back. Man, listen, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it. Okay. Outside of that, we just gotta see what's going on with the fighters that currently doing their thing. Like Sebastian Fundora that's had a couple of fights already with his wins over Cordell Booker and Tim Tszyu, or like Xander Zayas, as I mentioned, who had his win over Jorge Garcia to become the WBO champion. You know what I mean? So we really want to talk about those guys there, at this particular point.
Did you say there was an opportunity for Keith Thurman to fight Xander Zayas as well as Fundora, or just Fundora?
Just Fundora.
See, if I had a choice for him, I would prefer him to fight Xander Zayas.
Well, I mean, if they could have something where how they say an offer you just can't refuse, maybe. But I don't know, because the thing with Thurman is like, what Thurman's been talking about. You know what I'm saying? Send the contract, or whatever. But I'm like, he's Keith Thurman. like I thought, he's the one that was, unified champion at one point at welterweight. He was the one that, could have been considered as a top guy in the welterweight division. But then he had, his fight against Manny Pacquiao, and then all of that momentum just, went out the window.
He got married too. That's probably
Yeah, yeah.
what took the momentum.
So there's also that. You know what I'm saying? Big ups about guy Clarence here in the building on the live chat, man. Salute to you on this thing here for the Boxing Source podcast here for August 17th, 2025, man.
Does
But
it
yeah,
make sense for Thurman to fight Fundora, or is that like a career closer to retirement move?
it would be. I mean, my thing would be is it's an opportunity for him to become a multi-division world champion, right? He would have had that opportunity last year if he, was healthy, when he was going to be going up against Tim Tszyu, because at the time Tim Tszyu was a WBO champion at 154 pounds. But then, with Keith Thurman getting injured, you had, Sebastian Fundora step in, and then the WBC added their title on to that particular fight there for March 30th of last year. So that's the thing about it. So yeah, I would say that Keith Thurman against Sebastian Fundora, would be pretty good. Even though Sebastian Fundora, at least for this year, has had two very impressive performances, as I mentioned, with his wins over Cordell Booker and Tim Tszyu, getting two stoppage victories there at that point. My thing would also have been this, like, both fighters that hold world titles have kind of like talked a little bit about each other here off and on. So why not see if they could entertain that potential bout between Sebastian Fedora and Xander Zayas for the WBC and WBO titles? Zayas was a WBO mandatory, and Fedora decided to have the rematch with Tim Tszyu. Hey, it's about the money. That's pretty much what that was. It was all about the money. I don't, like I said before, I don't blame that move. So now you're able to get that win over Tim Tszyu. I don't know as far as like what they're saying for like mandatory challenges for the WBC. They haven't said anything yet. So if you're not gonna have, like, for example, if you're not gonna have Sebastian Fedora fighting someone like a Vergil Ortiz, if Vergil Ortiz isn't necessarily ready for that type of bout, right? Then why not go ahead and have this unification bout take place? I mean, I don't see just being real. I don't see why not. There might be people within those organizations that may be against it, but as of right now, I don't see why not. Shout out to Jaime Alvarado here on the chat. He asked, "Who would be a good comeback fight for Errol Spence Jr.?" You know what I mean? Who would be a good comeback fight for Errol Spence Jr.? Ooh, man, I had an idea. Someone also like made a suggestion actually yesterday. I think they made a suggestion as to who Errol Spence could come back up, who he could come back in against. Um, ooh, let's see. It wouldn't be like someone like a Jesus Ramos. I don't think it would be someone like that.
I can
Uh,
describe the characteristics, but I don't know who said person is.
what?
So it definitely needs to be either a fighter. It doesn't need to be a fighter that is super hot, right? It needs to
Mhm.
be a fighter who's either an age fighter, who who's a good journeyman mature fighter, or it needs to be a used to be hot fighter that sort of took a step down because of whatever happened in their last fight or two. It needs to be somebody like that. Like it doesn't need to be. You don't need to put Errol Spence in a fight that he got to prove his mettle. Like you really need him to build his confidence and to really understand, is this really what he want to do? And if it is what he want to do, is it something his body will allow him to do?
Mm. Well, I would say maybe like a Terrell Gausha. What if it would be someone like a Terrell Gausha who, has been floating around as a contender there at 154 pounds? That could be somebody that Errol Spence Jr. could come back against, there at 154, since they're saying, hey, he's going to be one of those guys to kind of like see, who could contend at the top at 154. So you're going to have Errol Spence come back, have him come back against someone like, like I said, the Terrell Gausha. Hey, if they're going to have him, hey, this Errol Spence, I know it's Errol Spence, and he says like no tune-ups or nothing like that. But here you haven't been in the game, for it's going to be coming up to like what, like 2 years now. So why not just have this bout? You're going up here against someone like a Terrell Gausha to get yourself in the mix there at 154 pounds, and then later on down the line, that could set up much bigger fights, there in the future. Like I mean, you had one thing where they kind of like mentioned, hey, you could have Errol Spence Jr. there in a fight, and have Jermell Charlo in the fight, maybe like back to back or within the same card or something like that. That could potentially have something later on down the line between those two guys. But it would still has to, work itself out. It says the only fight for Spence at this time is the one against he's the ring, long, long gone. I mean, we'll see, man. We'll see. As I don't know, what he's been, doing outside the ring. Haven't really kind of like followed that or nothing like that. So it is what it is on that point. If he's like anywhere closer to getting himself back in the ring, that's going to be on him. Of course, we know about the unknowns there for Errol Spence Jr., particularly with him and having the trainer there in his corner and that type of stuff too. So we got to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think you made a great suggestion with Gaucher, because it's a fighter that ideally, if Spence is anywhere near the Spence he used to be, Like he should be able to take those punches from Gaucher. But if he's not, and he can't take the punches from Gaucher, that tells us everything we need to know. Like it's a fight. I mean, that's probably the best fight. Like a guy who like a style where he's kind of like just content with just going with the motion in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a perfect
But
style. But what?
oh yeah, but I mean the thing with him too is that he kind of like is floating in between 154 and 160. So I mean that it just depends on if that could basically happen there within 154, or maybe they could have something where it's like a catch weight of sorts, or maybe like a 156 or 157 if they lock down a fight between like an Errol Spence Jr. and Terrell Gausha. That way you don't necessarily have to have Errol Spence Jr. Really make 154 pounds. It's not for a world title fight. It wouldn't be for a title eliminator. So, that could open the door for the Errol Spence Jr. to say, hey, if it's going to be like at 156 or 157, and Terrell Gausha has, had competitive fights, at least in the middleweight division, with his bouts against Elijah Garcia, particularly against Elijah Garcia, there, and also Carlos Adames last year, then, maybe you could have Spence versus Terrell Gausha around that 157-pound range. So,
'Cause
yeah, go ahead.
I was just reseconding and saying good suggestion.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of like what I was kind of, as some folks would say, what book the territory, whatever it is. Shout out to Brunch Boxing on that. That I would book Errol Spence Jr. if he was going to come back, go up against a guy like a Terrell Gausha. Especially if he's going to be campaigning there at 154 pounds later on down the line. But I think it's more about them trying to have what these notable fighters get involved in the game. We've had a lot when it comes to one superstar fighter of sorts that had a bout on March 1st. And I'll talk about that there too with Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, having that draw with Lamont Rose Jr., right? And now, fast forward, and here we are. It's August 17th. We were supposed to have a fight on August 16th between those two. A lot of people thought that was going to happen, but given a couple of things that have kind of like went on along the way, whether it's inside the ring or outside the ring, you haven't necessarily had something where this rematch could be taking place. And yeah, even though we had the news in reference to Tank Davis having the legal stuff kind of like cleared and sorted out, that opens the door for him to get back in the ring. A lot of people are kind of like getting this idea, including Lamont Rose Jr., that we're not going to have the rematch, or at least this year, we're not going to have the rematch. So that kind of like leaves, as some would say, Lamont Roach Jr. out in the cold of sorts. But he's had like suggestions of fights that could happen, like between him and Shakur Stevenson. They kind of like went back and forth on Twitter in reference to that. There's been a suggestion as far as like Lamont Roach Jr. and Gary Russell Jr. Lamont Roach Jr. kind of like has completely dismissed that and says that he would want to pursue Gary Antoine Russell. Gary Antoine Russell ain't even really thinking about that right now. He's thinking about unification bouts at 140. So kind of like makes for a interesting situation, at least in the lightweight division, with Tank Davis, Lamont Rose Jr., and a number of those fighters at the top of the lightweight division at this point. So you do have that to kind of like get sorted out here within the next couple of months. And we might have something outside of the box, so to speak, with Tank Davis later this year if he's not going to be facing Lamont Rose Jr.
I'm sorry, I'm going back to our last topic, but I thought of a fighter that Errol
For
Spence
okay.
and said fighter can make a good decent amount of money. And this particular fighter needs the money. Is the suspense killing you, JR?
It's kind of getting me here kind
It's
of
getting you? You don't know who I'm
yeah.
about to say?
No.
Adrian, the problem Broner.
No, no,
He just
no,
Errol Spence just need a fight.
no, but no, not Broner, man. Not
Broner need a fight too.
no, no. Then I mean, like those guys were basically like part of, as they say, the clique or something like that. You know what I mean? You would have like a Errol Spence, you would have an Adrian Broner, you would have a Tank Davis, you would have the Charlo brothers, something like that. Like all of those guys were kind of like that era for Heyman boxing or PBC, right? But the hard luck that Adrian Broner has had, the thing there with Errol Spence Jr. like having the loss to Terrence Crawford, and the whole thing with the Charlo brothers is kind of delayed or kind of like set things back, so to speak, there with the number of those fighters. Now with Adrian Broner, like he had his fight there with Blair the Flair Cobbs, and you seen there with Blair the Flair that he ain't got anything. He ain't got anything. And we all know about his post on social media and the one that he put in like his stories recently there. And but even if there was like some way, I guess, so to speak, to try to give him an olive branch of sorts, I don't think it would be against an Errol Spence Jr. I just don't. There wouldn't really make much sense for Errol Spence to kind of like have that fight there as his comeback fight. Really doesn't like help him out.
It doesn't help him out. A fight that he know he can win, a fight that he can get his juices flowing, throw as many punches as he want to throw, a fight that he should be able to make more money than probably anybody else that he fights outside of like somebody who could probably hurt him. Um, to me, I'm not trying to say what Joseph said. I'm not trying to lean into his comment, but it is more likely that Errol Spence will not fight going forward than will fight. It's more likely that he will fight less fights going forward than more fights. So to fight a fight with Adrian Broner, both of them need money. They, can make Broner can sell the fight. They get a little enough money on the table. Broner be like, I used to be your friend, but I need this money. I gotta get this money. Broner gonna play it up. He gotta get this money, and it's the money or you. And then, I'm you not feeling this, but yeah, I mean, I think they can play it up, and then it's a safe fight for Spence. Yeah, what? Yeah, I don't know, man.
Nah, I just don't
Not
see it.
realistic.
I don't. Nah, not realistic. One, Adrian Broner like most likely needs the money. Errol Spence doesn't. Like he's good. He's good with his ranch, his family, all that stuff. He's good when it comes to that part. He has like other things outside of the ring that he takes care of. He's there, still managing the career of Frank Martin, so to speak. There, with his promotional company. So I don't think that he's really kind of like hurting for money like that. But it's more about like if we just, I guess people haven't necessarily like felt like there was an actual closure to his career, even though we had that big loss to Terrence Crawford. It's like, okay, that's one loss. So what else that could be out there for Errol Spence, particularly at 154 pounds, if they feel like he could still compete, at a high level. And the thing about it is with him, as I was mentioning before, he says like no tune-ups, but at this point of his career, and this kind of like happens overall, like you gotta have something like that in your professional career. This is I know we got the social media thing going on right now, but this shouldn't be much different than boxing, in as they say, its heyday. Like you had these top fighters have, as they say, tune-ups. Whether it's them moving up in weight or whether it's them, when they had a world title or defending the world title a couple of times, and sometimes they had one-offs with guys or fighters that weren't necessarily in the top 10 or the top 15 of the rankings. But it was just something to keep them busy and keep them going there before they have a higher caliber fight later on down the line. So you could go down the list of a lot of these, well-known fighters, famous fighters, or fighters that are, within that top 10, 15, or 25 of all time. They had those fights where, those were stay busy fights. against guys that y'all everybody knew that wasn't of their caliber, but they still did it in order for them to stay busy. So think about what was that?
Oh, so I just want to understand what you're saying. So he can have a stay busy fight against Gaucher, but not against Broner.
But not
He
against
can't have a
Broner.
stay busy fight against Broner.
Yeah, not a state visit fight against Broner. Nope. No, no, yeah, no, no, that ain't gonna work. That ain't necessarily gonna work. I think a Terrell Garcia would be like perfect. You could have it, like I said, at AT&T Stadium or whatever the Mavericks call their stadium or whatever it is. You could have Errol Spence Jr. headline that fight, and have that be the thing. Because I mean, hey, it would kind of like go with the theme of having Manny Pacquiao coming back after 4 years out of being in a professional boxing ring against Mario Barrios at the MGM Grand Garden Arena, right? It wasn't necessarily a T-Mobile Arena. It was at MGM Grand Garden Arena. So you could have Errol Spence coming back against Terrell Gausha, whether it be at AT&T Stadium or, in American Airlines Arena or whatever it is, man. What's good with
Gaucher got a
Smitty there in
title.
the building? Who?
Gaucher got a title or something.
What you ask?
Oh, okay.
No, he doesn't. He's just like ranked in the 154 pound division right now. Or at least they're at in the WBA, right, at number 11.
Okay,
Okay,
that makes
now
sense.
you can have him there around that range or whatever, but hey, you get Errol Spence in there, and like I was saying, have him fight around 156 or 157 for this fight, could kind of like see where he's going to be at, because we don't necessarily know if he could really make 154. Yes, they had him, suggested at one of those guys for 154, but we don't know for sure if he could make 154 pounds, on a consistent basis. You know what I'm saying? So I would just have that, be a fight that could say, hey, all right, let's see, first off, if you get the weight down, how you're able to get the weight down, who are you working with in order to train in order to have this fight take place. All of that stuff could be ironed out having a fight against Terrell Gausha. And with Terrell Gausha, it's like, hey, this is something here that's a come up. You had a split decision loss against Elijah Garcia. A number of people felt like you won that fight. So here, this could be like, oh, okay, if I don't get like a rematch with Elijah Garcia, I could have something that could be much more lucrative against an Errol Spence Jr. And hey, you could have that shot to say, hey, I would be a guy that would beat Errol Spence Jr. in this comeback fight. So it makes sense I think for me, it makes sense for both parties.
Yeah, the more you explain it, I mean, like you said, it makes sense for Gaucher because this is a sort of redemption arc for him to say like, "Hey, I'm on whatever level," and then for Spence, it gets him in the top 15, and then at that point, he can have a title fight.
Yeah. Yep. There
That,
you
I
go.
mean, that makes sense.
There you go. So that puts them, that would put them right in the mix. There. I mean, I said that Garcia was in the WBA rankings there at this particular juncture, but you could have some of these other sanctioning bodies try to get in the mix. If Errol Spence Jr. comes back and says, "Hey, all right, we're gonna put Errol Spence Jr. In like number 7 in the WBC rankings or something like that to kind of like make for a bigger incentive of sorts there for the fight." But the other thing too was like some were saying that they could rumor for Errol Spence, if he has a comeback fight here this year, that it could be a big fight, whether it could be against a Vergil Ortiz Jr. or finally a fight against Sebastian Fundora next year or something like that. Then hey, you could have that happen. You know what I mean? So that I think that would kind of like make the most sense there for Errol Spence Jr. If he's having a comeback fight this year, that it would be against someone like a Terrell Gausha, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at 154. It could be at 156 or 157 at this current juncture. There. So that's what I had on that, man. I wanted to see here if there was going to be something later on down the line as far as like the schedule goes for next week, but I'm not necessarily seeing that. I think more people are gearing towards what's happening in September. We've had like I said, a number of fights here that happened this past weekend. There is going to be like a double header there for most valuable promotions in Orlando, Florida. That's coming up. As I was mentioning there with Juventus Tejas versus Abasparao, that's going to be on August 23rd. All right. You're also going to have was it Jermaine Ortiz versus Steve Claggett on that card for August 23rd, and Lucas Vadi versus Roger Gutierrez. You're gonna have like a couple of fighters there from the Tampa Bay area that's going to be involved in that card August 23rd in Orlando, Florida. Of course, as I mentioned, their most valuable promotions. It's going to be on the zone. So, have an eye out for that. And with the thing there with Juventus Tejas, having that WBA interim championship on the line there against Bas Barao. That's going to be a key fight there at 154 pounds. So, that's mainly what I have for the schedule that's upcoming. Then we gotta just prepare for what's happening in September. There's gonna be a few fights in September, that first weekend of September. But then it all culminates into what's happening in Las Vegas. They're on Netflix. Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Crawford for the undisputed super middleweight championship. So that's pretty much what's on the slate there on that front. So that's pretty much what I got here on this thing. Academic, you want to see if you could have your take on reference to that 140-pound division, or you want to table that for another time?
I want to table it to Wednesday. Give me a little bit of time to whip some up in the kitchen. I wanna give the people what they want. They don't believe in me. They don't think my cooking skills. I took some lessons from Terrell. They don't think my cooking skills is real. So I want to cook some up.
All right, gotcha. All
So
right,
Wednesday.
all right, so Wednesday we're gonna have a recipe up there for that. And like I said, we got a number of things here that's on slate for the schedule here on the Boxing Source channel. You got, of course, as I mentioned, there Real Boxing with Coach Ronnie Shields and Brother Joseph Herring of War Week Boxing on Tuesday. We got a special show that's on slate for that. And on the midweek report, we're going to have this thing here with the Boxing Academic, and we're going to have another special guest on schedule for the show there. So we're going to have a few things here that we're going to be working on and working towards too as well. And I also was going to see if I could get like another guest scheduled on. Hopefully, I don't know if it's going to be Monday or Wednesday or something like that, but we're going to see if we can work on that as well, because we got like a number of events that's going to be happening actually next weekend. It's not just the fights that's going to happen there with MVP, but it's going to be something that's scheduled in San Antonio on August 23rd as well. So we got that on the slate too. So y'all be on the lookout for anything as far as like any updates for that San Antonio card coming up as well. You had something else here, academic?
Well, I'm saying I don't have to do it Wednesday. I can do it whenever it fit in. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, so it can fit in whenever. I
Word,
just I
word.
just wanted to like mess with Joseph and then put something together and like show him why I'm the boxing academic and piss him off a little bit more. That's all.
Gotcha. All right, all
No
right.
no real rhyme or reason for this. Just piss him
Yeah,
off a
yeah,
little bit
yeah,
more.
yeah. I feel you. All right, so yeah, with that being said, big thanks to the Boston Academic here for joining in on this particular edition of the Boston Source podcast, and for everyone that was able to listen live here, at least through the YouTube channel and through Rumble. Of course, we have it in audio format, so shout out to everyone that's listening through audio replay, whether it's through Spotify, Amazon Music, Amazon Podcasts, or whatever you use for podcast apps. We thank this for your support, and we're gonna be able to do more here on the Boston Source. So when you can, just check us out. We appreciate the support. Hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube, but there, hit the subscribe button if you're on YouTube. There, we appreciate the support. And with that being said, I'm out, y'all. Peace.